Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Cyber Shadow. In the last part, we went through a bunch of cleanup through the game's prior stages. Now we're at 90% completion. Boy, am I happy to see you. I thought we'd lost you for a second. And hey, look at you all souped up now. I wouldn't want to be on your bad side. Speaking of which, I saw a Parador heading towards Mecha Island. I bet that's where Dr. Progen is. Let's take the fight to them. You ready? So notably, I am entering Chapter 9, Mekacity Docks, with a swag blade equipped for reasons. And if you look carefully on the screen right now, you might notice there's two little targets around the bend in the stage design here. That's what the E-radar we got last time does. It marks where items roughly are on the map, just like that helmet pickup in either X2 or 3. I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head. I want to say it might be X3. So our goal with the swag blade here is just to have it survive until we get to a certain set piece, because we need its reach to get something that isn't immediately obvious. This level, you gotta be careful of the mines in the water, because you might think they just explode, and they do, but they home in on you the moment you touch the water. So you need to precariously platform across this, which isn't too hard if you're not going for the Easter eggs, but if you are, it can be a little tough, especially if you're just trying to keep the swag blade alive. Our goal here is to get onto this ship and get into its first room with the swag blade. Because if we go down here and take care of this little hazard in the way, we can hit the swag blade to our left and it hits an invisible switch. And in this room we need to use the momentum of the swag blade to hit all these switches in a very quick order and get the third and final Easter egg. This is going to give us the optional power-up. What it does isn't immediately obvious until you attack. We now have Zelda's sword beams. When you're at max HP and attack, you send a little shockwave forward that does, I think, about the equivalent damage of your normal sword strikes. It's surprisingly useful, and if there's any reason I wish there was a New Game Plus mode, it's so I could take advantage of the charge blade, the double jump, and this at basically all times of the game. It's fun as hell to use. So the main mechanic for a lot of the Mekacity Docks is actually these little fan generators we're seeing here. We can only attack them on the glowing orange point, which means you can only hit them from, it seems like one direction, but you can hit them from sort of three. As long as your sword's hitting that light while on the same third of the sprite as that, you can hit it. So if it's, say, something that's facing downwards, you can hit it from the left or right pretty easily. But you need to be careful of it all the same. And kind of weird, they bring back the main core of the tank from stage 3 here for a brief section. I think they even do it twice. This level's kind of weird due to some of the things it does like this, because it's got a unique aesthetic and some interesting ideas, but it goes by much quicker than basically any of the previous few levels. In some regards, it feels like it's meant to be a power trip level, but in other regards, it feels like this level could have been placed at a different point in development and they just decided to place it here for narrative reasons more than anything. We're coming up, though, on two of the interesting parts of the level, namely where one of the power-ups is for it. But also, the end of this stage, at least, is relatively different. On top of that, it's also where I died a lot on my first playthrough. And looking back, I don't really get how I did that. Yeah, this is what I mean. You can destroy these ones facing down with the rising fire, but you can, as you see with that last one I just destroyed, hit them from the side as long as you're more or less on like the bottom third or half of the sprite, or the same half of the sprite-ish as the main target. So for the next power-up in this stage, we want to ignore the level design, essentially. You might think the water down there is riddled with mines, and it is, but if you place your jumps correctly, you can find yourself down at this hidden door, which is going to lead us to our another cyberspace section. This is actually the last one of these in the game, and you can tell it is, because the moment we hit this, we're going to have about 20 different turrets spawn one at a time. The spawn rates get faster, but if you're good at keeping on top of things, they shouldn't get much of a chance to do much damage to you, barring one just telefragging you just about. Again, this mechanic feels like the one the game needed the least, and it's only mostly here for aesthetic reasons and because the developer thought it was cool. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. I just wish they could have used that space to flesh out other things, like maybe having more cutscenes for the main plot that aren't just lore documents and flashbacks. Speaking of the flashbacks, something I do find kinda cool about them and I didn't notice it until like my second playthrough. Overall, they're in complete reverse order. And on my first playthrough, I thought they were just kind of up, down, and all around in terms of their time place, but no, it's distinctly in reverse order, and I like that idea in terms of like recalling memories. You're recalling your most recent to your most distant. But again, like a couple of extra cutscenes, maybe a couple of extra conversations with the Parator or Exo, or even more like the one we had with Geo where he explained the main plot just about. Could have made this game a lot more approachable from the storyline aspects. Tracking the elementals is easy enough with their huge amounts of essence. But we have to find a way to reach Mecha Island to set them free. Not much in our way besides a few corrupt machines and some monsters. No biggie. Says the dead person. I don't think I've missed any NPCs I can talk to like that throughout the game in terms of like the corpses and all that. If I did, they're probably just locked away in some corner I completely jumped over without paying attention. I at least appreciate that those characters are there to add some flavor text, even though it's mostly just explaining what's going on again. So now we're moving on to the boss fight for Chapter 9, which isn't your average boss fight. This is an enemy rush. We're having a bunch of these team bots come out after us. Two different types, blue and red. The red ones act a little more berserk, but when they get killed, they crash onto the ship and cause the purple fire to show up that takes a while to dissipate. There is an achievement to this chapter that is completely tied to this, where you need to finish this section without touching the deck. So this means you need to just consistently dash jump them. I don't know how that's possible, honestly. Like I said, there's a couple achievements in this game that just make me not want to go for all of them, and this is one of them. Although, if you get a lot of them on screen, just dashing into them over and over again is honestly pretty fun. The dash is such a cool ability. I wish you had it for more of the game, and I guess you do have it for about half the game overall, but having it from an earlier point could have made for some interesting level design choices. Maybe squeezing through some tight spaces like Mega Man, highlighting the fact that it's basically a teleport more than anything to get past some more instant kill type hazards. They could have done some cool stuff with it, but I also probably would have made the difficulty curve a little inconsistent, I guess. With that, once the boat has reached its destination, you're good to jump across, and we're basically now in Chapter 10, Mecha Island Spaceport. This stage is a little interesting in how it front-loads itself, but it's not a very interesting level in the long run, I find, despite being the last normal stage, because once we reach that distant point, we're at Chapter Final, I think. If you haven't gotten 100% yet, don't worry, you have at least 2 teleporters left to go back in the game. There's one at the very end if you want to anyway. Well, that's a wall. That's a giant robot. Meet the Combinatron, the mini-boss for this stage. It's your average face and hands boss. You do need to actually tackle the hands, even though they're not worth the HP for the bosses, though, because at certain points in the fight, it'll try to restore its HP using its hands sucking some essence out of somewhere. The main missiles it fires leak out the purple fire that lingers, as do the hands when they're damaged. When they're not damaged, they fire homing projectiles. Once the hands are damaged, though, you can go straight after the head and it dies pretty quickly. With that said, one of the achievements for this chapter is in this boss fight. You need to specifically airstrike the head 10 times in a row without landing. So you need not only a lot of the SP upgrades, but I think you need enough to do the charged version of the airstrike in particular. Kind of annoying, but it's doable. Shadow, you scared me for a second. You need to keep it together for just a little while longer. She's here. She's right below us. This containment field is blocking the flow of essence. It's way stronger than the one at the reactor. We need some serious firepower to reach our master below. Our master must be down there. To get there, we'll need someone that packs a punch. So I guess that's where the end of our journey awaits, but we have to go a bit roundabout to get there. So starting off, they actually give you a blade extend here, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I think that's here to make 2 achievements easier to get, because this section here is the best place in the game, I think, to get the Stay Airborne for 30 seconds achievement, as well as the 10 enemies dashed through in a row achievement. The only place that might be better for the 30 seconds one is when you're on the boat on the way into Chapter 10, potentially, but I'm not entirely certain. Plus, I think, potentially, the airstrike might work for the 30 seconds in midair achievement if you're going for that as well, not just the dash. The dash might be better for helping you reach other enemies to stay airborne, but it's not exactly the best for outwardly staying upwards, I guess. So this chapter's main mechanic is moving platforms above spikes, essentially. They do have these little spider mechs crawling on the webbing, sort of like the Koopas crawling on the grating in the Mario World castles and fortresses. But for the most part, you're just kind of waiting for the platforms and dodging anything that they're getting near. Not exactly what I would call the most interesting final level mechanic, but I guess the thing that feels weird about it is particularly the placement. Because the rest of this game's been all about making you feel in control of your movements and moving fast and feeling powerful if you can do that well, even with my warnings of take your time. So the final stage being essentially a patience game is kind of weird, especially at this point. But, oh well, I guess. That's like, what, 1.5 levels I'm not the biggest fan of in this game overall? Maybe 1.6 counting certain parts of Chapter 7 and 8. I guess it's more like 1.8 at that point. Either way, that's right. That's a majority of the game I really think is worth your time. Also, word of advice. From memory, whenever you're waiting for these doors to open when you press the switches, just physically attack the enemies with like the charge strikes and shurikens. Do not dash strike into them. Because something that doesn't get translated too well visually in terms of watching, but you feel when you play the game, is whenever you do a dash strike, the game does this minor slow-mo effect at the end of the attack to kind of emphasize the impact of it. That does actively slow down the opening of doors because the entire game stops for like a brief second to give that impact frame some time to breathe. And if you're waiting for those to open, that means you're just wasting your time and potentially making things more dangerous if you're getting too many enemies around you. Just use your charge strike at this point. It's going to do a lot better for you in the long run. But that said, I absolutely love this track. This soundtrack's really good. Have I said that enough yet? It's really good. But yeah, like, especially right here, these purple enemies spawn infinitely, both the blobs and the little spider mechs. Just physically attack. Don't spam the shadow dash or whatever it's called. It'll help you with time in the long run with this particular door. I died here a lot on my first playthrough before I realized that. And I guess you could just take the time to parry shots here. It's a good place to grind for the 50 parries you need for that one achievement, but there's better things to use your time on. The elementals are beyond saving. Dr. Progen has somehow fused them into his own body. With their power, Progen can tap into the infinite flow of essence from the ethos. There's no hope. No one can defeat him now. Well, he hasn't met me, now has he? And we're coming up on the actual boss of Chapter 10. And this is one that can be pretty quick to kill or pretty slow to kill. This is going to be Spider Rail, which I choose to believe is a reference to Boss Spider from Mega Man X. This thing's got a couple attacks. It's got flamethrowers it can aim below itself. All of its eyes can fire projectiles you can parry out of it. It can spawn baby spiders on the 4 main quadrants of the platform. And it can fire explosions that cause lingering fire for a little bit as well. You can actively destroy these small eyes, and that's actually the achievement for this fight, is destroying all the small eyes before defeating the boss fight. Once you get towards the latter half of its health, it actively starts to move the elevator horizontally to sort of mess with where you think attacks are going to go, plus it allows its fire attacks to become tracking projectiles. If you're good about being aggressive with this fight, it can go down pretty quickly, but you need to make sure you're watching where all of its projectiles are going, because it's pretty easy to lose track of all of them in the long run as well. With that, though, with every item we've gotten thus far, we are now at 100%. The power-up we got from the Combinatron was the last power-up in the game. And if you want any proof of that, well, here's your second-to-last teleporter, I think. Maybe last one. My analysis shows that airstriking an enemy allows you to regain your footing almost instantly. That means you can jump repeatedly. Double, triple, and quadruple jumps are going to make you soar. this is where they tell you about that, in case you hadn't figured it out yet. So yeah, if you haven't gotten 100%, go back for anything you may have missed. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 10, we're going to go finish off the game. See you guys then.